Welcome back to Reliable Sources. Chris Arnade's beat is the forgotten man and woman. He says he's just a guy with a car and a camera, but he's telling stories via Twitter and columns in The Guardian. Interesting turn of events because he's a former Wall Street trader who quit his job and then started taking these pictures, traveling across the country, writing about poverty and addiction, meeting people that he says are part of a very divided country. It's a divide that frames what he says is a front row versus back row America. Two kinds of people speaking two different languages. I sat down with him and asked him to explain.
The front row defines itself through its career. You can think of it that way. I mean, that's their meaning to them. Whereas the back row, and I don't mean that at all in a dismissive way, it's just a analogy. The back row is somebody who generally has, if they have an education beyond high school, it's been cobbled together through community colleges, through smaller state schools. And they generally work with their muscles, not their mind. And I think those two Americas, the front row and the back row, really look at things very, very differently, and they almost have a different language. And Trump has exposed that gap. I mean, he's exposed our racial divide, which we've known we've had, but he's also exposed what I call our educational divide.
Is some of what you're doing exposing a form of media elitism?
I think there's an elitism in the media that's not intentional necessarily. I mean, I don't think anybody in the front row are bad people in aggregate. I just think, they've been detached and they don't realize they're detached. And I think it happens when you get into the media. You have, by definition, to break it in the media, you have to become front row. You have to go through journalism school. You have to go through all this process. And after 5 or 6 years, you're a front row. You may not intend to be that. You may not think you are, but you are. And that elitism is kind of a creeping elitism that I don't think is badly intended. It just is.
When you're visiting these communities, are you talking to them about media consumption patterns? You mentioned
not much.
CNN and Fox being on. You like to post from McDonald's where the TV is on mute. Do you get the sense that people are tuned in or tuned out?
I think they're more tuned in than we realize, but not necessarily to the issues that we talk about. I think local issues are just extraordinarily important. People still read local newspapers. People still consume that to the degree that's there. In any of these towns, there are empty lots where there used to be factories. I mean, this is a real thing. And that loss, I don't think the national media up until recently has really covered it to the way that it really impacts communities. So I think the local issues, and then I would say at another level is, especially at the higher end media, the New York Times, what happens is they feel, rightly or wrongly, that newspaper is against them, or that the media is against them. So when Trump says,
well, they've been told that by politicians.
They've been told that, but I think it works because it rings true to them. For many people, there's a lot of diversity in these communities, but in aggregate, they're not writing about their communities in a way that they experience their communities. If I go into back row community, as I call them, one of the biggest questions I'll ask is, do you think your children's life will be better than yours, and is your life better than your parents? And then almost in unison, the answer is no. I don't think my children's life is going to be better than mine. Now, in the front row communities, they're all like, yeah, things are great. Things are going to be better for my kids. That difference, is something they've experienced. Their life is worse than it was 20 years ago in their mind. And so if they're going to blame somebody, they're going to blame the outside politicians or the outside world, and that the media is convenient to blame in that sense as well.
Your trips, your visits to these communities, a lot of this, as you're saying, predated Election Day. You just happened to be in these places that ended up being pivotal to the election of President Trump.
Right. I had no intention of writing about politics. I mean, I was writing about addiction. That was the project. It was addiction and poverty in America. And it just so happened that, it happened that wherever I went, there was despair. Addiction is a byproduct of despair. In the white communities I went, I saw Trump resonating. I often say, where I saw hope leaving, I saw drugs and Trump entering in the white communities. In the black communities, Trump wasn't entering. but drugs were entering. They've been there for a long time. So I had no interest. I had no intention of ever writing about Trump.
But now, do you feel that you're a sort of a Trump translator?
I suppose. I say we speak very different languages. I say the front row and the back row speaks very different languages. It only took me 3 years of spending time in the back row communities to understand that, wow, we really speak different languages, to understand that language.
And why aren't more journalists doing this work?
I don't think people have the resources to do it. I think, just sending someone around the country in a car and saying, go to these 30 communities, spend a week and a half in each one. I don't think any media level, any senior media person would approve that.
Last question for you. Given all of this work, do you feel more hopeful about the country or less?
Less. Sorry.
Less.
I wish I could say hopeful, but the division.
The divide is more extreme than folks might realize in their own communities.
Trump is exploiting that divide. He's exploited that divide in very negative ways, and the reaction to Trump has only made that divide larger. I think we, the front row, the back row, all of this is a division that is only growing, and unfortunately, I don't see good things ahead.